Over the course of writing this review, I ended up down a rabbit hole and it turned into a discussion of Kotaro Ujikoshi, the game's director, but I try to maintain at least some focus on the Somnium Files. I did veer off a lot because I wanted to avoid spoiling the game as long as possible, but it has to be done, otherwise the review would be a minute long. The thing is, I don't think I can talk about Somnium Files unless I discuss Ujikoshi's earlier work, as he tends to bring expectations with him. You see, there's a lot of tropes he consistently applies to his work, usually all at the same time, so I figured we would need his previous attempts as a jumping off point. First, I want to talk about the Zero Escape trilogy, Ujikoshi's first series of games that he carries over numerous ideas, mechanics, and even sound cues from into the Somnium Files. Even if, in some respects, the ideas are actually just established, pseudo-scientific tropes, I think that's a strength of his work, and really grounds it among the immense Japaneseness of it all. Zero Escape is a series that began on the Nintendo DS with 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors, which, incidentally, is one of my all-time favorite games. It's a sci-fi visual novel-like game intersected with escape room puzzles. Yeah, if you've got a hankering for escape rooms, Zero Escape is a big dirty trilogy full of them. The series grew increasingly weaker story-wise as it went, for numerous reasons. I could spend a whole section talking about how indulgent Zero Time Dilemma was in its own tropes, and how it all compounded into a weaker experience. Also, it's framed awkwardly and you can't skip through dialogue visual novel style, and that sucked. But the ideas and execution of it all was so interesting and intrinsic to video games, that he's continued with a lot of that framing into the Somnium Files. These ideas are time travel, parallel universes, and some smaller ideas that still recur through every game. Yes, I censored that third one. It happens a lot, but it's the only thing on the list that would constitute a genuine spoiler, so I'll include it as a secret. Let's take a look at 999 properly for a minute, where it all began. Now, Ujikoshi could have been inspired by something he previously worked on, and decided to expand those ideas in 999, but it clearly became an obsession of his. Because of the limits of the Nintendo DS, mechanics that became integral to all his games were missing the quality of life improvements to make it viable beyond doing it once. That is, the use of time travel and parallel universes manifesting in gameplay as a flowchart where you can jump to any story segment you want. There are multiple bad ends in 999, but there's only one ending you need to unlock the true ending. Following these two routes precisely, with a guide, will take you through two completely different experiences where every puzzle is different. The people you spend time with are completely swapped around, and those two experiences are intended to work together as a greater whole. While, as a story, I think 999 is his strongest work, as the limitations prevented it from getting as muddied as his later work. It's been fascinating watching him take the same ideas every time and do something new and interesting with them. That said, the second Zero Escape game, Virtue's Last Reward, at this point I should say that this and 999 are available widely under the title The Nonary Games. Virtue's Last Reward was the point where I feel he implemented the alternate timeline system with absolute mastery. This is the network. I know it looks messy as hell, but what makes it work is the ability to click on any of these boxes to restart the story from a specific point. Unlike the first game, you don't have to replay sections and get frustrated playing through a puzzle you've already done and totally forgotten. Maybe I'm a bit bitter about that. And also, unlike the first game, there are several points in the timeline you need to reach to progress through several other parts of the timeline. Basically, you are cut off from progression if you don't have information. For example, when the meaning of this graffiti is solved, you now have a solution to a puzzle far off in some other route that has just been unlocked. And if you'd already reached the locked timeline, you're notified that it's now unlocked. This is a mechanic Ujikoshi employs to this day in the Somnium Files. There aren't as many timelines by comparison, of course, but it's still used just as effectively. I will revisit some other things Zero Escape did first, when we get to the main review. Now it's time to talk about Uchikoshi's anime. He has to date written 2 series that I've watched for this review, after holding out on for ages, and one was great and one was lame. But get this, they both still had those same tropes in them. Not executed as well because the interactive medium adds so much, but they're alright. The Girl in Twilight is a magical girl show that starts off with the girls trying to enter a parallel universe in the first minute, through a radio frequency. They eventually pull it off and there's weird mechanics and villains and transformation sequences, and it's kinda gay, like any other magical girl show. But let me tell you, it's not very good. It's just not. Punchline is a series I'm about to spoil the hell out of, but it's really good, so I'll give you the caveat now to decide whether you want to skip that section and go watch it instead. It's about a kid who loses his body and gets superpowers from looking at girls' panties. Yeah, that's probably the reason I held out on watching it for so long, and now, if you're still here for the spoiler talk, it's not really about that at all. As you progress through the series, it begins to feel like that was an excuse to get the show greenlit. There's even an acknowledgement later in the series episode previews. But yeah, it's got the stuff. It's got time travel and parallel universes. It's got references to established sci-fi lore and pseudoscience, which I didn't mention, but like Zero Escape is full of that stuff. The kid gets knocked out of his own body and uses some ghost powers before he goes back in time to prevent the end of the world. You later find out that 2 other people have his powers, and they all swapped bodies 9 years ago. So this has been the body of a girl the entire time. This girl is a superhero, part of an idol group, and also happens to be one of those whose bodies were swapped. This girl is a robot, this girl is a spinster, and this girl was a shut-in with a pet bear, and together they have to stop a cult from dragging a meteor down to destroy the planet. Alright, I'm actually just spewing information about this series at this point, but all of it is relevant to our final topic. Though I'm not going to tell you why. It's a good show though, take my word for it and play one of the games instead. Right, it's finally time to talk about the actual game.